Hello, welcome to the YouTube channel of Christ United Methodist Church, located in the Owen Brown Interfaith Center here in Columbia, Maryland. My name is Reverend Angela Wells. My pronouns are she and her, and it's my absolute joy to serve as the pastor here at Christ UMC. Whoever you are and whatever your story, we are so grateful that you have found your way here to our YouTube channel today, and we look forward to connecting with you further. Christ UMC is a reconciling congregation, which means that we as a church have committed to the full inclusion of LGBTQ+ persons in the life and ministry of the church. We have also pledged to become an anti-racist church. Both of these commitments are a part of our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, striving to love God and neighbor in all we do. At CUMC, we celebrate Christian love that encompasses absolutely all people.
This morning, the scripture comes from the 9th chapter of John, the first 11 verses. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed to him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in this world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." Then he went and washed and came back to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, "I am he." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" And he answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed, and I received my sight."
The doctors say that I probably started losing my hearing around age 10. I have a condition called autosclerosis. You know those little teeny tiny bones in your inner ear that vibrate to conduct sound? Well, mine got stuck, calcified in place, and no longer would vibrate. It was gradual onset, which is why I didn't notice it. Because it started while I was so young, I started adapting to it without even realizing that that's what I was doing. I learned how to read lips. I thought it was just a neat trick, not realizing that I was becoming more and more dependent on lip reading to understand what people were actually saying. I also thought I was a heavy sleeper. Turns out I just couldn't hear. Anyway, by the time I started full-time ministry about 10 years ago, I was starting to admit that there was a problem. I struggled to understand people on the telephone in particular, without the benefit of reading lips. It was impacting my ability to be a full part of the community I was serving. So I finally went to the doctor and sure enough failed my hearing test. I had my first surgery in April of 2015. They would only do one ear at a time, so we started with the right ear. They took out that teeny tiny little scabies bone and replaced it with a teeny tiny prosthetic. The surgery was very effective, but recovery was rough. I reacted very poorly to them messing with my inner ear and was so dizzy in recovery that my eyeballs were rolling independently of each other. The nurses were gathered around to see this unusual phenomenon. Not how you want to gather a crowd. Anyway, the recovery was so miserable that I put off getting the second surgery. And then, life happened, time went by, and before I knew it, we were in the midst of a global pandemic, and I still only had one functional ear. Now everyone was wearing masks, and I couldn't read lips. place that I wanted to be as an immunocompromised person, so I couldn't get the surgery either. I deeply regretted not having done the second surgery before the pandemic. Not being able to hear or understand people made relationships difficult, especially trying to form new ones. I'd meet with a new person at church and try to piece together their story from the every third word I was hearing. It was no good. Well, I finally had my second surgery done in August of 2021, and now I only have a small deficit in the left ear. I can mostly hear now, which is especially good since we're still wearing masks. I can't imagine trying to start this or any new appointment not being able to hear and everyone wearing masks. I wouldn't have been able to integrate into a new community. It wasn't the hearing loss itself that was the problem. I adapted to that. It was the loss of community that I couldn't fix. Surgery healed my hearing, sure. But more importantly, it restored me to my ability to be in meaningful community. Today's story of healing, the man blind from birth, is a similar story. His vision is restored, sure, but the bigger miracle is his restoration to community. The man blind from birth found himself lacking in community. He was a beggar. His condition was assumed to be because of sin. As we can see from the disciples' less than PC question, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Well, Jesus squashes that line of questioning quickly. It's not about sin, he says. After the man is healed, the man's own neighbors didn't even recognize him. They weren't sure. Is this not the man who was used to sit and beg? They asked. It's strange that they don't recognize him. He's presumably lived his whole life in close proximity to these people. But maybe that's just it. They were in close proximity, but they never really saw him. To them, he was simply the blind man, known for his blindness and not his humanity. Jesus didn't see him as a blind man. Jesus saw him as a man who was blind from birth. There's a difference. Language matters. First and foremost, this man was a person, a beloved child of God. Being blind was a secondary detail, not the entirety of his identity. But to his neighbors, that's all he was, a blind beggar. But just who was blind in the story? The neighbors are the ones who ignored him, who didn't even see the man right before their own eyes, who didn't even recognize him once he could see. And the disciples aren't much better. They're so hung up on who sinned, on the scandal, on the blame game, that they miss the presence of God standing in their midst. The story keeps going after verse 11. It's a long story. Like the Samaritan woman that we met last week, the man born blind gradually recognizes Jesus. First he sees Jesus, the man, then he recognizes him as a prophet, then as being from God, and by the end of the story, the man born blind is a new disciple of Jesus. The man who had no community found community in this ragtag lot of Jesus' disciples. He was healed, sure, but more importantly, he was restored to community. And then the story goes on. Jesus keeps talking into chapter 10, still in response to the man born blind. In chapter 10, we get Jesus talking about being the gate, about being the good shepherd, about Jesus coming to give abundant life. We usually take those metaphors as individual stories and look at them apart, but they belong in this narrative. It's part of this same story. It's part of the explanation of what happened in the man born blind. This unnamed man, who didn't even ask to be healed in the first place, is found by Jesus. So what does it mean that he is healed? The man hears Jesus' voice just as the sheep hear the voice of the good shepherd. Jesus incorporates the sheep into his fold. The man becomes a disciple experiencing abundant life in community. The miracle itself is only 2 short verses in this 2-chapter story. And the method, however strange it appears to us, of mud in the eyes, was a traditional folk remedy. It was what was done at the time. The miracle itself of him being able to see is not really the focus of the story, so much as it is the turning point. It's a definitive before and after type situation. I once was, but now am, was blind, but now I see. In the dialogue that follows, the man recounts what happened multiple times over as he's being questioned incredulously by the neighbors, by the Pharisees, by even his own parents. And as much as they try to make this a theological argument, the man born blind is clear. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. That's the man's testimony. No more, no less. Kind of like the Samaritan woman last week. Come and see a man who told me everything I've ever done. This much I know. The rest, come and see for yourself. Modern science has taught us that eyesight involves our eyeballs receiving and interpreting light. But that's not how people understood eyesight in Jesus' day. In first century Palestine, they believed that the eyes emitted light to allow for sight. So in healing the man's eyesight, Jesus is restoring light within his eyes. Jesus, light of the world, is placing his divine light within the man born blind, so that others might see God at work. The neighbors, the Pharisees, the family of the man, they all reject him and his testimony. He is expelled from this community that he was never really a part of to begin with. But he gains a different community, one in which his light is free to shine, one in which he can truly be seen, one in which Jesus leads to abundant life. There is power in community. There is healing in community. This is something we know intimately as a part of this community of Christ United Methodist Church. There is power in community. It's a powerful thing to be seen and known and accepted and supported, to belong. I see it in how you care for one another, how you genuinely check in with folks who are struggling, how you bake casseroles for those who are sick, how you pray for one another. I see it in how you stick around after worship. There isn't even coffee hour, and you still stick around to chat, to ask how each other's families are. You raised each other's children. It's a beautiful gift to witness, this gift of community. The man born blind never knew this sense of community. But Jesus found him and invited him into a new fold, a new flock. One can be blind and have abundant life. One cannot lack community and have abundant life. We are made for community. It's part of our God-given DNA. In the creation story, God says it's not good for humans to be alone, and so God creates a second human. In our individualistic society, there are many people like the man born blind. Many people who don't know what it is like to be a part of a community like this one. Many people who exist around other people without ever being truly seen or known. There are people all around us hungering for belonging, for community. Like Jesus, we are called to invite them into the fold. Come and experience abundant life. Come and be cared for by the Good Shepherd. This happens locally in our little corner of God's great big creation here in Columbia, how we are inviting folks into the fold. Our discipleship team has been studying the demographic data of our neighbors here in Owen Brown in an effort to better understand and get to know our community. But this is the work not just of the discipleship team, but the work of all of us. to see those around us who are hurting, who seek belonging, who need community, and invite them to come and see for themselves the joy we have come to know in this life-giving community. At the end of service today, you're going to receive 5 of these invitations to Easter worship. These are for you to use to invite friends, neighbors, co-workers, people you know who would benefit from the gift of community here at CUMC. We have something good here, something worth sharing. And in addition to this local work, this community building happens globally too, as our work joins together with the work of United Methodists around the world to share the means for abundant life. Today is Sunday. is the United Methodist Committee on Relief, an organization that shows up to help people who find themselves in need through a natural or human-made disaster. Today is a Sunday in which we celebrate the work of the global church, and we recommit to supporting this global work with our financial gifts and our prayers. In the midst of natural and human-made disasters, people are separated from their communities of support. People are displaced, people lose resources, people are placed in conditions that do not allow for abundant life. And we have the responsibility, the true privilege, in fact, to be a part of the work to restore abundant life in hurting communities, to connect folks to life-saving networks of support. We understand that our commitment to our family in Christ goes well beyond the walls of Ovick or the limits of the city of Columbia. We are committed to our great big God family around the world. As those who have encountered Christ, the light of the world, we are invited to go forth shining that light for the world to see. Like the man born blind, we have been healed, restored to community. And now we invite others, near and far, to experience this same joy, this same abundant life, this same belonging. May all come to know the power of abundant life in community. May all come to know the belonging and grace we find in Jesus, the light of the world. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new to CUMC, whether you are local or tuning in from far away, we would love to connect with you. Please feel free to visit our website at www.cumcobic.org. Visit us on Facebook or connect with me, Reverend Angela, directly at angelawells153@gmail.com. As you move into whatever is next in your day, I invite you to receive this blessing. Beloved, you are made in God's own image. You are enough. You are not alone. Go forth with the blessing of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, to share the light and love of Christ in your community and far beyond.